David Reed stared at the holographic projection floating above his desk, wondering if his eyes were playing tricks on him. The symbols glowed in soft blue light, ancient and supposedly mysterious, yet they looked nothing like a mystery to him. They looked like something he had seen in every history book back on Earth. Professor Aldrin Quaros, a tall Valethi with skin that shimmered like purple silk, moved gracefully around the lecture hall. His forearms gestured excitedly as he spoke about the greatest archaeological discovery in recent memory. The tablets from Ashara 9 were supposed to be 50,000 years old, predating every known civilization in the galaxy by tens of thousands of years. These symbols represent the precursor language, Professor Quaros announced, his voice filled with reverence. The beings who created this script vanished before any of our species even discovered fire. They were the first, the founders, the ancient ones who walked among the stars when the galaxy was young. David sat in the back row, as he usually did. Being one of only 12 humans at Luminara Academic Station made him feel small most days. The other students were brilliant. The Valethi had perfect memory and could recall every lecture word for word. The Korthan could process complex mathematics in their heads faster than computers. The Sulari could see patterns that others missed entirely. And then there was David, just a regular human who had somehow managed to get accepted into the most prestigious xenoarchaeology program in the galaxy. He struggled with the advanced coursework, stayed up late studying while his classmates seemed to breeze through everything, and often wondered if he truly belonged here. But right now, none of that mattered. Because David was looking at letters he recognized, not symbols that resembled human writing. Actual human letters. He leaned forward, squinting at the projection. There, clear as day, was the letter A. The Roman letter A next to it, what looked like the number 7. Further along, he spotted what could only be Arabic numerals mixed with something that resembled ancient Sumerian cuneiform. His heart began to race. The complexity of this script is extraordinary, Professor Quaros continued. Our best linguists have been working for months and have barely scratched the surface. We believe it may take years, perhaps decades, to fully understand even the basics of this language. A Valethi student named Terrace raised one of her hands. Professor, have we identified any patterns in the symbol arrangement? Some, Quaros replied, but they don't match any known linguistic structure. This is entirely unique. David wanted to raise his hand. He wanted to stand up and say that it was not unique at all, that he could read portions of it right now, that this was impossible because humans were the new kids in the galaxy. Humanity had only joined the Galactic Collective 300 years ago. Human civilization, according to every history text, was maybe 10,000 years old at most. There was no way human writing should be on a tablet that was 50,000 years old. He kept quiet. Speaking up would make him look like a fool. Everyone would think he contaminated the site somehow, or that he was making things up to get attention. Worse, they might think humans had hoaxed the entire discovery. That would be a disaster for Earth's reputation. So David sat in silence and took notes. He wrote down every symbol he could see clearly, sketching them carefully in his notebook. His hand trembled slightly as he worked. Next to each symbol, he wrote what he thought it meant. The letter B, the number 3, a Chinese character that meant water, a symbol from the Devanagari script used in ancient Hindi. When the lecture ended, students filed out discussing theories about the precursors. David gathered his things slowly, waiting until most of them had left. His roommate Brent Wu appeared at his side. You look like you've seen a ghost, Brent said. He was the only other human in their year, a friendly guy from Singapore who studied stellar mechanics. I might have, David muttered. Want to grab lunch? Maybe later. I need to check something in the library. Brent gave him a curious look but shrugged. All right. Don't study too hard. David headed straight for the archive section of the station's massive library. The place was nearly empty, just a few students scattered among the endless rows of data terminals. He found a private booth in the corner and sealed the door behind him. His fingers flew across the holographic keyboard, pulling up Earth's historical databases. He started with the Roman alphabet, comparing the symbols from the lecture to standard Latin letters. Perfect match. Then Arabic numerals. Perfect match. Then he moved on to Chinese characters, Sumerian cuneiform, Egyptian hieroglyphs, and Devanagari script. Every single one matched. David sat back in his chair, feeling dizzy. This was not possible. It could not be possible. Yet here it was, right in front of him. The precursor script was not alien at all. It was human. Completely, unmistakably human. He spent the next 4 hours cross-referencing every symbol he had sketched. The more he looked, the worse it got. The script was not just borrowing from human writing systems. It was combining them in ways that showed understanding of how they worked. The grammar patterns looked familiar. The syntax structures made sense to him in a way they should not have if this were truly alien. When he finally left the library, the station's artificial sun had dimmed to simulate evening. David walked through the corridors in a daze, barely noticing the other students who passed by. His mind raced with possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. Either someone had planted this as an elaborate hoax, or human history was completely wrong. And if human history was wrong, then what did that mean for everything else the galaxy believed about itself? He reached his dormitory and found Brent already asleep. David lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, knowing that sleep would not come easily tonight. Tomorrow he would need to figure out what to do with this information. But tonight, he could only lie there and wonder how his alphabet had ended up on a tablet that was supposed to be older than human civilization itself. 3 nights of secret research had turned David into a paranoid mess. He jumped every time someone entered the library. He cleared his search history after every session. He kept his notebook hidden under his mattress like some kind of criminal. Brent had definitely noticed something was wrong. David caught him staring sometimes, concern written across his face, but his roommate had not pushed the issue yet. That changed on the 4th night. David returned to their room at almost midnight, exhausted from another session in the archives. Brent was sitting up in bed waiting for him. "Okay, what's going on?" Brent asked directly. "You've been acting strange since that precursor lecture. You're barely eating, you're not sleeping, and you spend every free moment in the library. This isn't normal even for you." David dropped his bag and sat down heavily on his bed. He was tired of keeping this to himself, tired of the weight of it pressing down on him every hour of every day. "Can you keep a secret?" David asked quietly. "Of course, and I mean a really big secret. The kind that could get us both in serious trouble." Brent's expression grew serious. "Now I'm worried." "What did you find?" David pulled out his notebook and opened it to the pages filled with symbols and notes. "The precursor script. I can read parts of it." "What do you mean you can read it?" "Nobody can read it." "That's the whole point. That's what I thought too." David pointed to his notes. "But look, this is the letter A. This is the number 7. This is a Chinese character. This is Sanskrit. Brent, the entire precursor script is made up of human writing systems." Brent stared at the notebook, then at David, then back at the notebook. "That's impossible." "I know. Human civilization is only 10,000 years old. These tablets are 50,000 years old." "I know. So either the dating is wrong or someone contaminated the site, or this is all a massive hoax, or—" Brent trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "Or human history is not what we think it is," David completed. Brent stood up and paced the small room. "Do you understand how crazy this sounds? If you're wrong, you'll be laughed out of the collective. Every scientist in the galaxy will think you're either incompetent or a fraud. And if I'm right?" "Then it's even worse," Brent said, "because that means the entire galactic historical framework is wrong. The elder races built their whole society on being the first, the oldest, the ones who guided everyone else to civilization. If humans were actually here first," he shook his head, "they won't accept it. They can't accept it." David knew Brent was right. The political implications were staggering. But he could not just ignore what he had found. "I need to talk to someone," David said. "Someone with more experience, someone who might understand what this means." "Who?" "Dr. Rena Flores. She teaches human history here. She's been in the collective for 20 years. If anyone might know what to do with this, it's her." Brent nodded slowly. "Okay, but be careful. Once you tell someone else, you can't take it back." The next day, David requested a meeting with Dr. Flores. She was a woman in her 50s, originally from Mexico, with sharp eyes and a reputation for not tolerating nonsense. She had fought hard to establish human history as a legitimate field of study at Luminara. Facing skepticism from alien colleagues who considered human civilization too young and insignificant to warrant serious academic attention, her office was small but filled with artifacts from Earth, ancient pottery, old books, even a fossilized trilobite in a display case. David sat across from her desk, clutching his notebook. "So, David," Dr. Flores said with a slight smile, "your message said you needed to discuss something urgent and confidential." "I'm intrigued." David took a breath and opened his notebook. "I need you to look at something and tell me if I'm going crazy." He explained everything. The lecture, the symbols, his research, the matches he had found. Dr. Flores listened without interrupting, her expression growing more serious with each passing minute. When he finished, she held out her hand. "May I see your notes?" David handed over the notebook. Dr. Flores studied it carefully, turning pages slowly, occasionally making small sounds of surprise or concern. Finally, she looked up at him. "You're not crazy," she said quietly, "but I wish you were." "What does that mean?" Dr. Flores stood and went to her window, which looked out over the swirling clouds of Helio 7. "I've been studying human history for 30 years, and for most of that time I've encountered small anomalies that didn't make sense. Archaeological sites on Earth that seemed older than they should be. Genetic markers that suggested human migration patterns we couldn't explain. References in ancient texts to technologies that shouldn't have existed." She turned back to face him. "I always dismissed these things as measurement errors or misinterpretations, because the alternative was too disturbing to consider." "What alternative?" "That we don't actually know our own history," Dr. Flores said. "That something happened a long time ago, something that was forgotten or deliberately hidden. And now you've found evidence that human writing existed 50,000 years ago, when we're supposed to have barely been using stone tools." David felt a chill run down his spine. "So what do I do?" Dr. Flores was quiet for a long moment. "The safe thing would be to forget about this. Destroy your notes, never speak of it again, and focus on your studies, but you're a scientist, David, and scientists don't ignore evidence just because it's inconvenient." She returned to her desk and pulled up a holographic display. "I'm going to show you something I've never shown anyone else." The display showed a series of archaeological reports, all marked as classified or restricted. Over the past 50 years, there have been 17 discoveries across the galaxy that didn't fit the accepted historical timeline. Artifacts that seemed out of place. Structures built with techniques that shouldn't have been known. And every single time, the findings were either explained away or quietly buried. Why? Because the collective's entire power structure depends on the narrative that the elder races came first, Dr. Flores explained. The Valathi, the Korthan, the Sulari. They maintain their authority by claiming to be the oldest and wisest. If it turns out that humans were here before them, or that their own histories are based on incomplete information, she shrugged. It threatens everything. David felt overwhelmed. This was so much bigger than he had imagined. What should I do? Dr. Flores closed the classified files and looked at him seriously. Professor Quaros is planning a symposium next month. Students will present their attempts at decrypting the precursor script. You should present your findings there. They'll never believe me. Maybe not, but you'll have evidence. Real documented evidence, and once it's public, they can't bury it. She smiled grimly. It won't be easy. You'll face skepticism, hostility, maybe even accusations of fraud. But if we're right about this, the truth needs to come out. David left her office feeling both terrified and determined. He had 1 month to prepare the most important presentation of his life. 1 month to gather every piece of evidence he could find. 1 month before he stood in front of the galaxy's greatest minds and told them that everything they knew about history might be wrong. The symposium hall could seat 500 beings, and every seat was filled. David stood backstage, his hands shaking so badly he had to grip the edge of a table to steady himself. Through a gap in the curtain, he could see the audience. Valathi scholars in their flowing robes, Korthan academics with their crystalline skin catching the light, Sulari researchers with their multiple eye stalks swiveling to take in every detail, and scattered among them a handful of humans who looked just as nervous as David felt. Brent appeared beside him. You don't have to do this. We could still back out. No, we couldn't, David replied. Not anymore. Dr. Flores joined them, looking calm despite the chaos about to unfold. I've reviewed your presentation 3 times. The evidence is solid. The logic is sound. Whatever happens, you've done good work. What if they don't believe me? Then they don't believe you, she said simply. But you'll have told the truth. That's what matters. Professor Quora stepped onto the stage and the crowd fell silent. "Welcome to the Precursor Script Symposium," he began. "Over the past month, our students have been working to decode the ancient writing discovered on Ashara 9. Today, they will present their findings." The first 3 presentations were exactly what David expected. Brilliant students with impressive credentials showing complex analyses that went nowhere. They had identified patterns, created statistical models, and proposed elaborate theories. But none of them could actually read the script. Then it was David's turn. He walked onto the stage and the murmuring began immediately. A human student. The whispers were not unkind, just skeptical. Humans were still new to the collective, still proving themselves. What could he possibly offer that the others had missed? David activated his presentation, and the precursor symbols appeared on the massive display behind him. "My name is David Reed," he began, his voice steadier than he felt. "And I believe I can read this script." The murmuring grew louder. Professor Quaros held up a hand for silence. "The reason I can read it," David continued, "is because it's not alien. It's human." Now the hall erupted. Voices raised in protest, confusion, disbelief. David waited for them to quiet down before continuing. "I know how this sounds, but please look at the evidence." He highlighted a section of the script. "This symbol here is the letter A from the Roman alphabet. This is the number 7 in Arabic numerals. This is a Chinese character meaning water. This is from the Devanagari script used in ancient Sanskrit." He moved through symbol after symbol, showing the matches. The audience watched in stunned silence now, their earlier protests fading as the evidence mounted. "But it's more than just individual symbols," David explained. "The grammar patterns are human. The syntax structures are human. Even the way the symbols are combined shows understanding of how human languages work." He pulled up his next slide. "I've analyzed the statistical probability of convergent evolution, creating these exact matches. The odds are so small they might as well be impossible. This is not coincidence. This is human writing." A Valathi scholar stood up in the audience. "Even if what you say is true, it must be contamination. Someone brought these symbols to the site." "That was my first thought too," David admitted. "But the tablets were found in sealed chambers, in geological layers that have been undisturbed for tens of thousands of years. The dating methods have been verified multiple times by multiple independent teams. These tablets are genuinely 50,000 years old. Then the human writing is newer," another voice called out. "Added later somehow. The chemical analysis of the inscription shows they're the same age as the tablets themselves," David countered. "I have the lab reports here if anyone wants to review them." He took a breath and pulled up his final piece of evidence. "But the most compelling proof is this." The display showed a star chart, carefully reconstructed from one of the tablets. "This chart shows the positions of stars and constellations. I worked with astronomers to determine when the sky would have looked exactly like this." He paused for effect. "The answer is 47,000 years ago, viewed from Earth's northern hemisphere." The silence in the hall was absolute. Even the skeptics seemed at a loss for words. "What I'm proposing," David said carefully, "is that human civilization is much older than we believed. That 50,000 years ago, humans had developed writing, astronomy, and possibly much more. Then something happened. Something that caused that civilization to collapse, leaving only fragments behind." Professor Koros stood slowly. His forearms hung at his sides, his usually composed expression showing clear disturbance. "This is unprecedented. If true, it would require us to completely reconsider not just human history, but galactic history as well." "I know," David said. "That's why I needed to present this publicly. This isn't something that should be hidden or ignored. It's too important." A Korthan scholar stood, her crystalline form reflecting rainbow colors under the lights. "Young human, do you understand what you're suggesting? The entire collective is built on the understanding that the elder races came first. We guided the younger species. We established civilization among the stars. If humans were here before us..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Everyone in the room understood the implications. "I'm not suggesting humans are better or more important," David said quietly. "I'm just showing you what I found. What it means is for all of us to figure out together." As he finished his presentation and left the stage, the hall erupted in debate. Some scholars demanded immediate verification. Others insisted it must be a mistake. A few sat in thoughtful silence, reconsidering everything they thought they knew. David made it backstage before his legs gave out. He sat down hard on the equipment case, adrenaline draining away and leaving him exhausted. Dr. Flores appeared, smiling broadly. You did it. You actually did it. Did what? Made everyone angry? No, you told the truth. And now they can't ignore it. Brent rushed over, his expression a mix of pride and worry. David, you need to see this. He held up his datapad showing an incoming message from the collective's central archive. The message was brief but shocking. Similar scripts had been found on 17 other worlds across the galaxy, all in sites previously classified as precursor locations. All of them were now being re-examined in light of David's presentation. 17 sites, David whispered. This isn't just about one discovery. This is everywhere. Professor Quaros approached them, his expression unreadable. Mr. Reed, the Valethi Academic Council has requested an emergency meeting. They want you to present your findings again, with full access to all classified archaeological data. Why? Because if what you've discovered is true, we need to know the full extent of it, and we need to know immediately. Quaros hesitated, then added, I admit I dismissed human civilization as insignificant. We all did. It appears we were catastrophically wrong. As they prepared to leave for the emergency meeting, David looked back at the symposium hall. Through the open doors, he could see scholars still arguing, still debating, still trying to process what they had learned. His simple presentation had shaken the foundations of galactic history. And something told him this was only the beginning. The real revelations were still to come. The emergency meeting had been scheduled for the next morning, but David could not sleep. He sat in his room reviewing his data for the 100th time when his communication device chimed. The message was marked urgent and came from an encrypted source. Meet me in Garden Sector 7, come alone. Trust no one else. You're in danger. David stared at the message. Every instinct told him this was a terrible idea, but curiosity won out over caution. He left a note for Brent just in case and made his way through the quiet corridors of the station. Garden Sector 7 was a biodome filled with plants from dozens of worlds, creating a strange and beautiful jungle. At this hour, it was deserted. David found a bench near a fountain and waited, jumping at every shadow. A figure emerged from between the exotic trees. It was a Korthan, tall and imposing with crystalline skin that seemed to absorb the dim light rather than reflect it. David recognized him immediately. Director Kavesh, one of the highest-ranking officials in the collective's cultural ministry. Mr. Reed, Kavesh said, his voice like grinding stones. Thank you for coming. Your message said I was in danger. You are. The Valethi Directorate is moving to suppress your findings. They're calling it unverified speculation that could destabilize galactic society. By tomorrow, they'll have convinced the Council to classify all precursor research and remove you from the program. David felt his stomach drop. They can't do that. The evidence is public now. Evidence can be discredited. Researchers can be dismissed as incompetent or attention-seeking. Kavesh moved closer. They've done it before. What do you mean? The Korthan pulled out a data device and handed it to David. What I'm about to show you could end my career. But I'm tired of the lies. David activated the device. Files began appearing. Dozens of them, all marked as highly classified. Archaeological reports, scientific analyses, photographs of artifacts. Over the past 70 years, Kavesh explained, there have been 32 discoveries that contradicted the accepted historical timeline. Human artifacts on worlds that humans supposedly never reached. Technology in ancient sites that shouldn't have existed. Writing systems that matched Earth languages found in places predating human space travel. David scrolled through the files, his hands shaking. Why didn't anyone say anything? Some tried. They were silenced, their careers destroyed, their findings buried in classified archives. The Directorate couldn't allow the truth to come out because it would undermine their entire authority structure. But why tell me this now? Kavesh's expression was hard to read, but David thought he detected something like regret. Because I helped them do it. 20 years ago, I was part of a team that found human remains on a Korthan colony world. The bones were carbon dated to 60,000 years old. Impossible, we thought. So we reported it as contamination, sealed the site, and never spoke of it again. He gestured at the data device. I've spent 2 decades watching evidence pile up, watching good scientists be destroyed for telling the truth. When I saw your presentation yesterday, I realized I couldn't be part of the cover-up anymore. David looked up from the files. What do you want me to do? Going public could destabilize everything. Humanity represents less than 1% of the collective's population. If the elder races feel threatened, they could isolate Earth completely, cut you off from the rest of the galaxy. Is the truth worth that risk? It was the same question Brent had asked weeks ago, but now David understood the stakes were even higher than he had imagined. The truth is always worth it, David said firmly, even if it's uncomfortable. Especially if it's uncomfortable. Kavesh nodded slowly. I hoped you'd say that. Then I have a proposal. I can arrange a private expedition to Ashara 9, the original dig site. No directorate oversight, no political interference. Just scientists looking for truth. If we can find more evidence, undeniable proof, they won't be able to bury it anymore. Why would you risk your position for this? Because the Korthan were like humans once, Kavesh said quietly. We were considered lesser by the Valethi. Primitive, unsophisticated, barely worthy of admission to the collective. We spent centuries proving ourselves, fighting for respect. And now I discover that much of our greatest achievements were built on foundations we didn't lay ourselves. He pulled up a holographic image showing complex mathematical formulas. This is the basis of Korthan warp theory, our proudest scientific achievement. We found these formulas in an ancient data cache on our homeworld 300 years ago. We thought they were a gift from the precursors, proof that we were chosen. But looking at them now after your presentation, I recognize elements of human mathematical notation. David examined the formulas. His knowledge of advanced mathematics was limited, but he could see what Kavesh meant. The symbols, the structure, even the way the equations were laid out followed patterns that seemed familiar. How many species built their civilizations on human discoveries? David asked. That's what we need to find out. Kavesh deactivated the display. The expedition leaves in 3 days. I can bring you Dr. Flores and a few others I trust, but you need to understand the risks. The directorate won't like this. If they find out what we're doing, there will be consequences. David thought about everything he had learned. The cover-ups, the suppressed evidence, the decades of lies. He thought about all the scientists who had been silenced for telling the truth. And he thought about what it would mean for humanity to finally understand its own history. I'll do it, he said, but I want to bring my roommate Brent. And I want your promise that whatever we find, it goes public. No more classified archives, no more cover-ups. Agreed. They shook hands, the gesture feeling strange between human and Korthan, but somehow appropriate. As Kavesh disappeared back into the garden, David looked down at the data device in his hands. Decades of suppressed evidence. 32 discoveries that had been buried and forgotten. He returned to his room to find Brent awake and waiting anxiously. Where did you go? Your note said to wait, but didn't explain anything. David handed him the data device. We're going on an expedition, and you need to see what I just learned. As Brent began reading through the files, his expression shifting from confusion to shock to anger, David sat down and tried to process everything. In 3 days, they would travel to Ashara 9. They would dig deeper into the mystery of human history, and whatever they found there would change everything. The truth was coming out, whether the directorate liked it or not. David just hoped he was ready for what that truth might be. Outside their window, the swirling storms of Helios 7 raged in eternal fury, indifferent to the small dramas of the beings orbiting above. But for David, the real storm was just beginning. Ashara 9 was a dead world, its surface scarred by ancient volcanic activity and meteor impacts. The expedition ship landed near the original excavation site, kicking up clouds of rust-colored dust that took several minutes to settle. David pressed his face against the viewport, trying to see through the haze. Not much to look at, Brent commented beside him. The best discoveries rarely are, Dr. Flores said from across the cabin. She had spent the 3-day journey reviewing all the classified files Kavesh had provided, cross-referencing them with her own research. Dark circles under her eyes testified to how little she had slept. Kavesh entered the cabin, accompanied by 2 other researchers he had recruited. One was a Sulari named Orin, whose multiple eye stalks allowed him to examine artifacts from many angles simultaneously. The other was a Valethi named Lyris, young and idealistic, who had grown disillusioned with the directorate's increasingly political approach to archaeology. The original dig site is about 2 kilometers from here, Kavesh announced, but I've been reviewing the geological surveys. There's an anomaly beneath the main excavation, something that reads like a void space, possibly artificial. The original team didn't investigate it? Oren asked, his voice whistling through specialized vocal chambers. They never saw it. The scanning technology 70 years ago wasn't sophisticated enough to detect it. Kavesh pulled up a holographic map. But with our modern equipment, it's obvious. There's a sealed chamber directly beneath where the tablets were found. They suited up and ventured out onto the barren surface. The gravity was lighter than Earth standard, making each step feel bouncy and uncertain. David followed the others across the rocky terrain, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and fear. The original excavation site was marked by faded equipment and collapsed scaffolding. Decades of abandonment had left it looking like a ghost town. But the tunnel leading down into the excavation was still intact. They descended single file, helmet lights cutting through the darkness. The walls showed clear signs of ancient work, smooth surfaces that could only have been created with advanced tools. At the bottom, they found the chamber where the original tablets had been discovered. According to the scans, the sealed chamber is directly below us, Kavesh said, kneeling to examine the floor. Help me clear this area. They worked together, moving aside decades of accumulated dust and debris. Beneath it, they found what looked like a perfectly circular outline in the stone floor. This is a door, Lyris said, running her hands along the edge. Look at the precision. This wasn't cut with primitive tools. Oren produced scanning equipment and spent several minutes analyzing the circle. There's a mechanism here, but it's old, very old. I'm not sure if it still functions. Only one way to find out, Kavesh said. It took them nearly an hour to figure out how to activate the mechanism. When they finally succeeded, the circular section of floor began to descend with a grinding sound that echoed through the chamber. Ancient machinery, still functional after 50,000 years. Below the floor was a ramp leading deeper into darkness. They descended carefully, aware that every step was taking them into the unknown. At the bottom, they found themselves in a large chamber filled with equipment. David's breath caught in his throat. This is a data center. The room was filled with what could only be computer systems, though their design was unlike anything currently used in the collective. The technology looked simultaneously advanced and ancient, familiar yet alien. Is any of it still functional? Dr. Flores asked. Oren moved among the equipment, his eye stalks examining every surface. Some of it appears to be in standby mode. Incredible. After all this time, the power source is still active. Lyris found what looked like a control panel. Should we try to activate it? That's why we came here, Kavesh said. Lyris worked carefully, her four hands moving across the interface with practiced skill. Slowly, the systems began to wake up. Lights flickered on. Holographic displays materialized in the air. And then, to everyone's amazement, a voice spoke. It was clearly automated, speaking in a language that David immediately recognized. English. Ancient formal English. But unmistakably human. Archive system restored. Welcome. Please state your access level. They all turned to stare at David. Don't look at me, he said. I don't have access to anything. Try responding, Dr. Flores urged. David cleared his throat, feeling ridiculous. We don't have access codes. Can you show us what you contain? There was a pause, then the voice spoke again. Access codes not recognized. Initiating public information protocol. Displaying historical archive. The holographic displays shifted, showing images that made David's legs feel weak. Humans. Dozens of them, hundreds of them wearing clothing that looked futuristic even by current standards. They walked through cities of gleaming metal and glass, operated technology that seemed like magic, and moved among the stars with casual confidence. This is humanity, the voice explained. 53,000 years ago, our species reached the stars. We established colonies on 17 worlds. We developed technology that allowed us to reshape planets and harness the power of suns. We believed we had secured our place among the cosmos forever. The images shifted, showing something darker. A massive stellar event, perhaps a supernova or gamma ray burst. The human colonies, one by one, going dark. Then came the catastrophe, the voice continued. We did not know it was coming. We had no time to prepare. The radiation waves swept through our colonies, destroying our technology, poisoning our worlds. Within a generation, our civilization collapsed. The displays showed the aftermath. Scattered survivors, their advanced equipment useless, struggling to survive on damaged worlds. Some colonies died out entirely. Others regressed to primitive conditions, forgetting everything they had once known. We created these archives, the voice said, sealed chambers on each colony world, designed to survive any disaster. We filled them with knowledge, with history, with everything we had learned. We hoped that someday our descendants would find them and remember what we had been. David felt tears running down his face inside his helmet. "We forgot," he whispered. "We completely forgot." The archives also contained gifts, the voice continued. Genetic repositories to help rebuild populations, terraform protocols to heal damaged worlds, and basic knowledge simplified, placed where it would eventually be found. Mathematics, writing systems, scientific principles. A new image appeared, showing human colonists placing data caches in caves and mountains, in places they hoped would survive. "We knew our descendants would have to start over," the voice explained. "So we gave them tools, seeds of knowledge that would help them rebuild, even if they didn't know where that knowledge came from." Kavesh stepped forward. "The Korthan warp theory. That came from one of these caches?" "Affirmative. Colony World 7, designated in your language as Korthia. The cache was discovered approximately 300 years ago by the indigenous intelligent species that had evolved there." "Indigenous?" Lyris asked sharply. "Yes, the human colonists on World 7 did not survive, but the cache remained waiting. When the Korthan species achieved sufficient technological development, they found it and used the knowledge within." The implications hit David like a physical blow. "How many species found these caches?" 11 species across 17 worlds have accessed the knowledge repositories. The Valithi discovered the fastest-than-light travel principles. The Sulari found the genetic engineering techniques. The Tirani learned advanced metallurgy. Each species believed they had discovered this knowledge themselves. Dr. Flores laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. "We gave them everything. Humanity seeded the galaxy with knowledge, and then we forgot we did it. And the species that found our gifts built their entire civilizations on them, never knowing they were using human discoveries." "That is correct," the voice confirmed. "The irony is profound. Humanity's greatest legacy is that they were forgotten." Brent spoke up, his voice shaking. "But some humans survived, right? On Earth?" "Affirmative. Earth colony, the homeworld, suffered less damage than the outer colonies. Approximately 10,000 survivors endured. They regressed to primitive conditions, but the population eventually recovered." "You are their descendants." David looked around at his companions. "A Korthan whose greatest achievement came from a human cache. A Valethi whose species advancement was built on human science. A Sulari whose very genetic engineering prowess originated from human knowledge. The elder races," David said slowly, "aren't elder at all." "Correct. Humanity was the first species in this region of the galaxy to achieve space travel. All subsequent civilizations benefited directly or indirectly from human knowledge." Kavesh sat down heavily on a piece of equipment. "Our entire society is built on a lie. Everything we thought we knew about history, about our place in the galaxy, is wrong. What do we do with this information?" Lyris asked quietly. They all looked at each other, the weight of the decision pressing down on them. In this chamber, they had found proof that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. The truth was here, preserved for 50,000 years, waiting to be shared. "We tell everyone," David said firmly. "No more secrets, no more lies. The galaxy deserves to know the truth." Dr. Flores nodded. "We'll need to document everything, record the archives, copy the data, gather physical evidence. The Directorate will try to stop us," Oren warned. "Let them try," Kavesh said. "We'll broadcast this to every world in the collective simultaneously. They can't suppress the truth if everyone knows it at once." As they began the work of documenting their discovery, David looked at the holographic images still floating in the air. His ancestors 50,000 years ago building a civilization among the stars, then losing everything and starting over. And now, finally, their descendants were learning the truth. Humanity had not joined the galactic community. Humanity had created it. The decision to broadcast everything simultaneously to every world in the collective was both brilliant and terrifying. They spent 2 days on Ashara 9, documenting every detail of the archive. Oren managed to interface with the ancient systems and create perfect copies of all the data. Lyris used her artistic skills to capture holographic recordings that conveyed not just information, but the emotional impact of their discovery. Kavesh coordinated everything, using his political connections to arrange transmission access that would be impossible to shut down quickly. David spent most of his time simply talking to the archive's artificial intelligence, asking questions about the ancient human civilization. He learned about their culture, their achievements, their fears, and ultimately their desperate hope that they would be remembered. On the third day, they returned to their ship. The plan was simple. They would broadcast from deep space far enough from any planet that no single government could stop them, close enough to major relay stations that the signal would propagate across the entire collective network within minutes. "Are we really doing this?" Brent asked as they prepared the transmission. "No turning back now," David replied. Dr. Flores checked the broadcast coordinates one final time. Every major news network, every government channel, every public communication system. In 5 minutes, everyone will know. Kavesh stood at the communication console, his crystalline fingers hovering over the activation control. "Once I trigger this, there will be chaos. Governments will scramble. The directorate will likely call for our arrest. Are we certain?" David thought about all the scientists who had been silenced over the decades, all the evidence that had been buried, all the lies that had been maintained to preserve a comfortable fiction. He thought about his ancestors who had built something amazing, lost it all, and still tried to leave gifts for the future. "I'm certain," he said. The others nodded their agreement. Kavesh pressed the control. The first few minutes were quiet. Then David's communication device started chiming, and kept chiming. Message after message flooded in, some angry, some confused, many simply shocked. The broadcast was reaching every corner of the collective. "It's working," Lyra said, monitoring the transmission. "Full propagation across all networks. They can't stop it now even if they tried." The broadcast included everything. The archive footage showing ancient humans among the stars, the explanation of the catastrophe, the locations of knowledge caches on multiple worlds, the proof that much of the collective's technology originated from human sources, and most importantly, the complete historical record that contradicted 70 years of accepted truth. Within an hour, the responses began arriving. Some were what they expected. The Valethi Directorate issued a statement calling the broadcast unverified and potentially fraudulent. Several governments demanded that David and his team be arrested for creating public disorder. But other responses were different. A Korthan science minister publicly admitted that they had always known their warp theory came from an unexplained source. A Solari historian published data showing anomalies in their species' genetic history that suddenly made sense. A Tirani engineer explained that their metallurgy techniques had always seemed too advanced for their civilization's timeline. The truth was resonating. People across the galaxy were re-examining their own histories and finding the hidden human fingerprints everywhere. "Look at this," Oren said, pulling up a newsfeed. Protests had erupted on the Valethi homeworld, not against the revelation, but against the Directorate for hiding it. Citizens were demanding answers, demanding accountability, demanding to know what else their government had concealed. Similar scenes were playing out across dozens of worlds. The old hierarchies that had maintained power by claiming to be the first and wisest were crumbling. The people wanted truth, not comfortable lies. 3 days after the broadcast, the Valethi Directorate collapsed. The ruling council resigned en masse, replaced by a temporary government that promised complete transparency. Within a week, similar upheavals occurred on 4 other elder worlds. The collective's governing structure began to reorganize itself. The old system that had placed elder races in positions of authority simply because they were supposedly older was being dismantled. In its place, a more democratic framework was emerging, one based on merit and cooperation rather than assumed superiority. David watched it all unfold from the safety of their ship. Arrest warrants had been issued, then quietly withdrawn. Some governments wanted to punish them for causing chaos. Others wanted to thank them for exposing the truth. Eventually, cooler heads prevailed, and they were granted immunity in exchange for sharing all their research. A month after the broadcast, David received an invitation to address the new collective council. He stood before representatives from hundreds of worlds, no longer a struggling student, but someone who had changed galactic history. "I didn't set out to cause a revolution," he told them. "I just wanted to understand some symbols on an ancient tablet. But what I found was bigger than I could have imagined. Not just the truth about human history, but the truth about all of us." He gestured to the diverse assembly before him. "For generations we've believed in a hierarchy based on age. The elder races on top, guiding the younger species below. But that was never real. We all grew together, helped by knowledge that was freely given 50,000 years ago by a civilization that wanted to leave something good behind after they were gone. Humanity didn't conquer the galaxy," David continued. "We seeded it with gifts and then forgot we did it. And you, all of you, took those gifts and built something magnificent. That's not something to be ashamed of. That's something to celebrate." A Valithi representative stood. "But our entire society was built on a false premise. How do we move forward knowing that our greatest achievements weren't truly ours?" "They were yours," David replied. "Finding knowledge and using knowledge are two different things. You took what you found and built civilizations, art, science, culture. That's real. That's yours. The fact that ancient humans gave you a head start doesn't diminish what you accomplished with it." The discussions continued for hours. Proposals were made for a new historical commission to re-examine archaeological sites across the galaxy. Plans were developed to search for more human archives and share whatever knowledge they contained openly. The entire framework of galactic society was being rebuilt on principles of transparency and cooperation. When the council session finally ended, David found Dr. Flores waiting for him outside. "You did well in there," she said. "Better than I expected from a student who barely passed his first-year exams." David laughed. "Those seem like a long time ago now. The university has offered you a research position, full funding to continue investigating human historical sites. Interested?" "Maybe," David said. "But first, I think I need to go home." 2 weeks later, David stood on Earth at an archaeological site in Africa where some of humanity's earliest writing had been discovered, or what they had thought was the earliest writing. Now they were digging deeper, looking for evidence of the ancient civilization that had existed before the catastrophe. Brent was with him, having decided to shift his studies from stellar mechanics to archaeology. Dr. Flores led a team of researchers, both human and alien, working together to uncover the truth. As David examined a newly uncovered stone tablet, he felt a strange sense of connection to the ancient humans who had carved it. They had built something amazing, lost everything, and still found the strength to help their descendants. They had given freely, expecting nothing in return, hoping only to be remembered. "Found something," Brent called over. David looked at the tablet more closely. The script was familiar now, a combination of the various human writing systems they had found in the archives. But this one was different. Older. The dating would need to be verified, but preliminary estimates suggested it was at least 150,000 years old. "I think we need to dig deeper," David said quietly. "Because if this tablet was genuine, it meant the cycle was even older than they had thought. It meant that humanity had risen and fallen not once, but possibly many times, each time climbing back from the ashes, each time reaching for the stars, each time leaving gifts for whoever came after." David smiled and whispered to himself, "How many times have we done this?" In the sky above, stars were beginning to appear as the sun set. Those same stars that ancient humans had navigated by, had traveled to, had called home. And somewhere out there, perhaps on worlds not yet discovered, there might be more archives, more evidence of humanity's long, cyclical journey through history. The galaxy had changed in the month since David first recognized his alphabet on an alien tablet. The old hierarchies were gone, replaced by genuine partnership. Earth was no longer the homeworld of a junior species, but a pilgrimage site where beings from across the galaxy came to understand their shared history. And David, the unremarkable student who had struggled through his coursework, had become the person who changed everything. Not through conquest or force, but simply by telling the truth. He returned to examining the ancient tablet, wondering what other secrets it might hold. The past was vast and complex, full of mysteries yet to be solved. But now, at least, they were finally asking the right questions. Behind him, the excavation team continued their work, humans and aliens side by side, digging into the soil of humanity's birth world. Looking for answers, looking for truth, looking for the next piece of the puzzle that would help them understand who they really were and where they came from. The sun finished setting and the stars grew brighter. Those eternal lights that had guided humanity through countless rises and falls, through civilizations gained and lost, through 50,000 years of forgotten history, and would guide them, David hoped, through whatever came next.